Welcome, and we'll of course start with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And we are, of course, in the context of Jacob's blessings to his sons. It's more of a prophecy, but it actually combines both. And the words he has for Yehuda, for Judah, for his son Judah, are considerable. And we are onto the last verse of his words to Judah, which indeed are both a prophecy and a blessing. And need I say that because this is poetry, essentially all this material is Hebrew poetry. It is very difficult, and the Hebrew is not easy, and I'm doing the best I can with it, and hopefully at least you get a good sense of what's going on here. So even this word, chachlili einaim miyayin, which means literally means his eyes are redder than wine. So, well, that's the miyayin, right? Or his eyes are red from wine. Uleven shinayim, and the whiteness of his teeth, from the word lavan. Let's take a look here. Mechalev, from milk. And again, his teeth white from milk. Rashi on this. And Rashi is going to explain some of the metaphor to us, and we'll take a look. So here we go, down in here. Chachlili. Lashon odem, it has to do, the meaning of this is redness. And yes, there is yismakkun, right? And again, that word samak in Aramaic means redness. And I will mention that the Onkelos here, the Targum here, is very free in interpreting as opposed to translating the words of the Hebrew here, because of the need to try and plumb out the metaphors. So, Lashon Odem Ketargumo, just as it is translated in the Targum. V'chein, and he says there is another example in Mishlei, that's the book of Proverbs, chapter 23. Lemi chachlilut einayim, to whom are his eyes red, okay? Shekain derech shotei yayin, so he says it is in the manner of people who drink wine, okay? That's the connection. Einehem ma'adimim, their eyes become red. Okay, mechalav, merov chalav, from the abundance of milk, sheyehe ba'artzo, which is in his land, in the land of the territory of Judah. Mir'eh tov le'edreitzon, fine pasturage for his flocks of sheep. So they used to use sheep's milk, I suspect, quite commonly, other than cow's milk. V'chein pirush hamikra, okay, and so the interpretation of the scriptural passage is adom einayim, right? His eyes, or the redness of his eyes, yehe merov yayin, will be from the abundance of wine. Ulevan shinayim, and the whiteness of his teeth, yehe merov chalav, will come from the abundance of milk. Ulefi targumo, however, according to the Targum, the Aramaic translation, einayim, the use of the word eyes, lashon harim, it's actually a reference to hills or mountains. Shemisham Sofim the merachok. Why mountains? Because from a mountain you can see afar. You can look out at great distances from the top of a mountain. The od targumo befanim acherim, or tirgumo befanim acherim, and moreover he interprets it in other kinds of senses as well. Lashon mayonot, okay, as to refer to fountains, the kiluach hayekavim, and the pouring out of the wine presses, na'avohi yekavim shelo, right? This is the Aramaic, its tanks of its wine presses, Ulashon Aramihu, and it's Aramaic. It's the Masechet Avodat Elilim. There's a Masechet called Avodah Zara that talks about dealing with idolatry, and it's page 74, and it says Na'ava Artacho, which means let me see. I think it means you use, I'm trying to make sure I have this correct. Yes. So it says that the way you purify the vessel is, then in other words, its cleansing is through the use of boiling water. Yechavran beka'ate, so the whiteness, right? Let his valleys be white, I believe. Targum Shinayim, it is the in Aramaic translation. It isn't, of course, a literal translation. It is a literary translation of teeth, Lashon Shines Haslaim. So there the teeth have to do with crags, the sharp crags of the rocks. So Rashi's giving us some insight in terms of the poetry and its interpretation. Next, now we're on to another tribe, Zebulun, right? The tribe of Zebulun, Lechof Yamim Yishkon. He will dwell at the shore of the sea. Vahu Lechof Oniyot, and here it means, and to him the ships will come to his shore, vaYarchato, and it's his edges. The Svaria translates it as its flanks. In other words, the edges of his territory, Al Sidon, are at Sidon. Now, Sidon belongs to Lebanon. It is not really part, I don't believe, it's part of the land of Canaan. But he's saying it's at the border there. Let's take a look here. Zebulun lechof yamim, right? Zebulun will be at the shore of the seas. Al chof yamim tieh artzo. So simply it means his land will border the shore of the sea, the Mediterranean specifically. Chof, the word chof, shore, ketargumo safar. So according to the translation, the chof is understood as a border. And the French marque or marca, something like that in French. He doesn't, interestingly enough, there's no Yiddish translation here. And in the tractate Yevamot, page 48, Vahu Yeh, I guess, trying to think if there's because I think this is Rashi here. Vahu Yeh Matsui Tadir Al Chof Oniyot, and he will be found regularly, constantly at the shore by the ships, by boats, b'makom hanamal, in the place of the port, at a port, she'oniyot meviot sham pragmatia. Why? Because the ships bring in trade, merchandise, goods. Oh, sorry, that's the wind. Okay. Put it so it doesn't blow. Excuse me. Oh, a little surprise there. Shaya Zebulun osek bepragmatia, because Zebulun would occupy itself in trade. They were traders. Umamtzi mazon, and they would provide food. The Shevet Yisachar, for the tribe of Yisachar, and this is found. This idea is found in the Tanhuma. it's a midrash on the Torah. Vehem oskin b'Torah, and the tribe of Issachar occupy themselves in Torah. Husha Amar Moshe, and this is referenced by Moses's blessing to the tribes before his departure. Samach Zebulun b'tzeitcha, let Zebulun rejoice in its going out. VaYissachar ba'ovolecha, and Issachar in his tents, in your tents. So the explanation of that little bit of poetry is Zebulun yotzeh bepragmatia. Zebulun goes out to trade. VaYissachar osek b'Torah. Dwelling in tents is understood as a metaphor for studying Torah. Ba'ohalim, in its tents. So we have a wonderful example that goes very, very early about providing financing for research, and to understand that there's this association of people who, while themselves are not researchers, are occupying themselves in providing making a really good livelihood, and use that livelihood to finance research. Not a new concept. Vayaketo al Sidon, and his flank or his border will be by Sidon. Sof Gvulo, that is the edge of his border. Yes, Samuch Sidon will be close to Sidon. And I have the sort of feeling that this means more, that there's some metaphoric understanding here. I mean, we know about the Phoenicians and about their trading and stuff like that, and whether or not, is there some association going on with this? My feeling is that there's more to this than simply that translation. So just explaining the word vayar kato, a little bit of an unusual Hebrew, sofo, that is its edge, kamo layar kate hamishkan. So when we see the construction of the Mishkan, we talk about certain parts of the boards, etc., that were fabricated for the corners of the Mishkan, and that's the word that we use there. Issachar, so Issachar, the tribe of Issachar now. Chamor Garim is a bony donkey. Rovetz, he crouches, Bain Hamishpatayim. Hard to translate this word mishpatayim, but I believe very often it's translated as sheepfolds. Tchumaya would mean that would be the boundaries, between the boundaries. And again, quite possibly there is some poetic interpretation of that. Let's take a look and see what Rashi has to tell us. Issachar chamor garim, right? Issachar is a large bone donkey. And of course, we know that a donkey is a beast of burden. So chamor bal atzamot, he's a donkey with large bones. Sovel ol Torah, who carries the yoke of the Torah. Kechamor chazak, like a strong donkey. Shemat inin oto masakave, which one is capable of loading him up with a heavy burden. So again, you can see how we are trying to understand this in its metaphoric sense. Rovetz bin hamishpatayim, right? Who crouches between the sheepfolds. Kechamor hamahalech bayom uvalayla. The idea here is that he is constantly studying, and he's being compared to a donkey who is constantly walking day and night, moving day and night. Ve'ein lo lina babayit, and he does not spend the night in a stable, in a house. Ukeshehu rotzeh lanuach, and when he wants to rest, when he needs to rest, briefly, rovetz ben hatchumim. So Rashi says he crouches between the boundaries, betchumei ha'ayarot, that is in the boundaries of the towns, sholich sham pragmatia, to which he's taking the merchandise, the trade. Let's take a look here. Let's go maybe a little bit more. Vayar menucha kitov. He saw rest, literally it means he saw rest, how good it was. Ve'et haaretz ki na'ema, and the land, how pleasant. Vayet shichmo lisbol, and he placed his shoulder to the burden to carry. Vahi lamas oved, and he dedicated himself, I guess we could say, understood for the burden to do the work, right? Or lamas, or yeah, for the burden. Let's see, here we go. He saw rest, how good it was, right? Ra'ah lechalko eretz mevurechet. He saw that for his portion it was a blessed land, v'tova lehotzi peirot, and fine to bear fruit, to give forth fruit. vaYechi.16.20231227, and he set forth his shoulder to the burden, all Torah, referring to the yoke of the Torah. Vayihi l'chol echav l'Yisrael. So he was, meaning for all his brothers, the Jewish people. In other words, this was a nation, a tribe of scholars. Lemas ove, again, to the burden of work, etc. Lifsok lahem, in other words, to decide for them hora'ot shel Torah, the decisions regarding the laws of the Torah, the sidrei iburim. So this has to do, I guess, starei iburim, and this has to do with calculating the months, and the months that are intercalated. In other words, what years required an extra month, and exactly how that was to be calculated. Shine'emar, as it states, is actually quite a famous verse within Torah scholarship, and this is Divrei HaYamim Aleph, the first book of Chronicles, chapter 12, and it says, Ubinei Yisachar, and from the sons of Yisachar, Yodei Bina, not, in other words, knowledge of understanding, le'itim, for the times, lada'at, in other words, for the seasons and how to calculate the calendar. Lada'at ma ya'aseh Yisrael rashehem matayim, in other words, to make known what Israel should do, and their heads were 200. Matayim Rashi Sanhedraot, 200 heads of the court Sanhedrin. They came from Issachar. V'chol achehem al pihem, and all their brothers, in other words, their fellow tribesmen, would follow what they had to say. In other words, on their mouths. Vayechichmo, right, to, I guess, yes, to lower his shoulder. Ishpil shichmo. So Rashi is giving us an easier understanding, to lower his shoulder. Kamo vayet shamayim, meaning he lowered the heavens. So this word nata is has to do with lowering, planting, right? He too was nechem, or lend your ears. In other words, lower your ears. Get them ready to listen. But Onkelos tigem befanim acherim. However, Onkelos translated it in a different sense. Vayechichmo lisbol. In other words, he lowered his shoulder to bear milchamot lichvosh mechuzot. So milchamot, to bear battles, v'lichbosh, and to conquer mechuzot. Okay, those areas. Shehem Yoshvin ala Safar. Why? Because Yisachar were settled along the border. Vayeh Haoyev Kavush, I think maybe Kavush Tachtav the muscle there. So it's interesting. And he says, and the enemy was conquered underneath him to serve them, to be their servants. And we will stop here for today. Any questions about what we've done? Okay, let's stop the share. And I can stop the recording.